Welcome to this session. In what ways could positive psychology interventions impact parents raising children with disability? To begin, I'd like to acknowledge the land on which I live and work, the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I'd like to pay my respect to elders of the Kulin Nation, and I extend that respect to other Indigenous and Aboriginal people who might be present today, who might listen to this along the way, who might be impacted by our work, and whose perspectives and cultures and ideas can impact upon our work as well. We're in for an exciting presentation today. I'm joined by a whole host of researchers, practitioners from New Zealand, from Australia, as we look at some of the perspective, some of the research, and some of the ideas within this space. To begin with a bit of framing, when we start to think about where we've been in the positive psychology field, we have all sorts of interventions that have been developed over time, things like mindfulness, gratitude, strengths, mindset, all sorts of ways to impact upon individual well-being and functioning in order to understand who does well in life and how to help others do that as well. But especially when we start to take that into practice, oftentimes, we might have some very good plans and ideas, but very quickly, things become very complex, and the reality looks a lot more challenging than we otherwise might expect. Indeed, when we start to look at the challenges that have come over the past few years, everything from natural disasters, everything with COVID, the lockdowns, people being cut off, and all of the disruptions politically and other ways in Australia, New Zealand, and other countries around the world, well, we can see that some of the interventions and ideas coming out of positive psychology can help people along the way. We also see that things are complex. And when we start to really apply the things that we're doing, oftentimes some of the simple interventions that might have worked well in our studies begin to break down when we start to say, well, what does this look like in different populations? What does this start to look like with those from a whole variety of experiences, challenges, difficulties, and backgrounds that we might encounter in our work? Coming from this, my colleagues and I have suggested the idea of systems-informed positive psychology, which explicitly incorporates aspects of the system sciences into positive psychology theory, methodologies, and discourse to optimize human social systems and the individuals within them. And that's where a lot of our work that's being presented today is really grounded in, which marries very well with the disability space, where there's a lot of writings and valuing of looking at the family as a system. And when we start to look at some of these ideas and how they marry together, it potentially gives us some insights of how we can use all of this in the future. Now, oftentimes when I talk about systems, people think about Bronfenbrenner's socio-ecological model. So we kind of have the individual that's nested within a series of other layers. So perhaps we have a child, and then we have the family, peers, schools around them, and then we might have our communities, we have the broader cultures and policies around us. That's part of a systems perspective, but that's only part of it. A system is a set of things that are interconnected in such a way that they produce their own pattern of behavior over time. It's not just a group, it's those that are coming together, and actually they create their own pattern. Systems can range from very small. So for instance, we have the human body, which is full of even smaller systems within that. It can range all the way up to, school systems on out to the solar system and beyond. And so the elements are dynamically interacting and impacting upon each other. An important concept within this is the idea of interconnectedness. It's not just about we have relationships with one another, but my actions impact upon you. You impact upon me. We impact upon the environment. And we actually have to be thinking about the dynamic ways that we interact together and the impact that that actually has on how we function, and how others that we might be connected to are able to function and able to operate. Within that, it's helpful to actually be thinking about the different perspectives that people might bring. So for instance, if I'm thinking about the family, there's the parents' experiences and backgrounds, there's the child, there's siblings, there's perhaps the school system or the disability care system and how those all interact together. And when we start to think about, well, what does the family actually need? What do the children need? Each of those might have a different perspective about what is needed. And each perspective is limited in their own way. But when we put those different perspectives together, we can start to get a more complete picture and start to move towards the best way to be moving forward and impacting upon the system as a whole, everyone that's interconnected within them. We also need to be thinking about the dynamic nature of things. Oftentimes in positive psychology, we might give someone an intervention with this idea that we'll see positive effects coming from that, but things are constantly changing. And so we always have to be thinking about, what's happening over time? How are things interacting with one another? Now that we need to be thinking about adaptation and emergence. We see that as systems are constantly changing and evolving, well-functioning systems evolve over time. Think about a family with a developing child. The needs of that child are changing over time. The needs of the parents are changing as there are pressures at work that are coming in and out. There are different demands from healthcare practitioners and others around them. These are all changing over time. And so we need to be adaptive in our way in which we're addressing to things. We are living through very unprecedented times. And in many ways, the world is ready for a positive psychology perspective. But we also need to be thinking about what that actually looks like and how we actually take our ideas from positive psychology and intermix that with some of the complexities of our world. And with that, listening to different populations and thinking about how some of the things that we study and do actually apply. One of these specific spaces is very much the disability space. While there is some work looking at bringing together disability and positive psychology, oftentimes these are sort of studied in isolation of each other. And yet our group would really suggest that bringing together some of these systems-informed components, concepts from positive psychology, and thinking about families with children with disabilities or adults themselves with disabilities, then perhaps we can find ways to think about how we can actually effectively help everyone in our systems, in our countries, in our cultures to flourish, not just those who are perhaps able-bodied, but each experience that people have, both as individuals and collectively. And so within that, I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Rachel Taylor, who is going to guide us through exploring some of the amazing insights, perspectives, and findings that my colleagues that are joining me today have to offer.
Welcome to our whole panel. What we're going to turn our attention now is actually to the disability space and have a few perspectives from different people who are working with children who have disabilities. And what I'll start with is I'll throw to you, Janine, who can tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a parent of a child with a disability.
Thanks, Rachel. I'd just like you to take you through a wee timeline, if that's all right. She was born with severe hip dysplasia, which was an easy 3 months fix in a harness, 23 hours a day, although members of the community felt free to judge and threaten to call SIFs with accusations of abuse. At age 5, I was arguing with her teachers that she wasn't meeting her milestones with reading, only to be told that she was fine, right up until I went in with proof from an optometrist and further hospital appointments that her eyes weren't tracking right. They were relieved that it wasn't their teaching strategies at fault. From 7 onwards, parents of children and teachers were often bringing her back to me, amazed that she had some kind of fall or accident with no complaint that would bring other children to the attention of the health professionals. It was a frustration for me that I would then take her to a doctor or nurse, only to be told that it was too late to stitch or otherwise repair. At age 11, her brain MRI proved that her functioning was not impaired, and therefore a diagnosis of dyspraxia was given. Interestingly, she had a foot MRI at the same time, which caused some confusion and humour when we next met her orthopaedic surgeon, that she had a brain and it wasn't in her foot. At age 13, we were at the doctor's every 3 months, adding weight to the argument for a paediatrician to see her as she wasn't walking wasn't walking right. 18 months later, we saw a wonderful paediatrician who finally started to connect the dots, and after much testing gave the diagnosis of Friedrich Ataxia. This is a rare neurodegenerative condition with a poor prognosis, low life expectancy, wheelchairs, and a deteriorating body, where eventually only her brain would continue to function normally. As it's a rare condition, local hospital and other medical professionals merely went through the prescribed checks as a box-ticking exercise with the sad, sympathetic looks of those offering no hope. Until I put my big girl pants on and started to search and argue and fight back. I spoke to a researcher in London when I went over for a family wedding. She then put me in touch with others back in New Zealand with the same or similar conditions and encouraged me to get in touch with the Melbourne Children's Research Institute. Wow, a phone call from a professional inviting us to come over and into the fold. They were much more positive, proactive, and offered me much more hope than what we had in New Zealand. But eventually it was changes being made in the disability sector here in New Zealand, where we were encouraged to have more choice and control over our funding, that we began to see Dara as just another member of our community. Not a burden, not a drain on good taxpayers' money. It changed our thinking. Talking with other parents and learning what we could see as encouragement to dream, set the scene for us becoming involved with the Now and Next program. Life-changing is how I describe it. A journey, not a destination, setting the platform for daring to hope and dream for more. Continuing to progress and improve our quality of life separately and together. As a parent, I'm so much more relaxed now, and my daughter feels so much happier to be around me. She flourishes now and feeling empowered to choose. At age 20, she now lives independently with flatmates her own age, is training her own service dog, drives a modified car, plays wheelchair rugby in tournaments around the country now, and argues with me for what she wants in life rather than sitting, moping and waiting to be done to. She makes me proud, and it's an ordinary everyday outcome for any parent of a child having survived her teens. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks so much, Janine. And I think so much of what you speak to is what we're going to be covering today, thinking about how do we shift this focus in disability away from this deficit to a more empowered and strength-based focus, bringing in a whole systems approach that treats the individual as part of a community and a wider system rather than just someone that's in isolation that needs to have stuff done to them. So Catherine and Anu, I might throw to you now to talk from a practitioner perspective about what it means to work with families with a disability. Catherine, do you want to go first?
Thanks, Rachel. I work as an occupational therapist, and I find when parents are seeking services, I find that when I ask how can I help, the family will tell me that the paediatrician told them that they need an OT, or they don't exactly know what help they actually need. My time with the family is then trying to understand the family and what's important to them, and then reframe their desires and expectations into the way the system works. Our system's a deficit-based model which focuses on what the child can't do, not what the family and the child can or would like to do. The family is often at the beginning of their journey with their child, and it's unusual for any parent to think in terms of goals for their child's future. So I'll spend time with the family to develop the goals, and this is the language the service uses to direct interventions. Sometimes a family will say that it doesn't know what goals they have, or they don't have any goals for their child. And they might ask for the opinion of the clinician, what goals do you think I should have? moving the control of the decision-making from the family to the clinician. This is an important moment that happens when families are beginning their engagement with services, and it's important to get this right for families.
Thank you, Catherine. And Anu, I know you've done a lot of research in this area as well. Could you talk us through what you think some of the key opportunities are for us to improve things in this space?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So just going on from Catherine, so I'm also a clinician and an occupational therapist, a researcher, and so on. And some of the things that I think that we use a lot as practitioners is well-meaning gatekeeping that we do with our families. So it's about feeling that we need to protect the family. So instead of showing them information and having a faith or a trust that they will be able to deal with the things that are there that would help them, there is this overprotective concern for parent well-being that we see in a lot of practitioners. So when they come to you with a question like, I never did goals for my other children, why do I need to do goals? I don't understand what this goal setting is. And so they look at you, towards you as the practitioner, towards you as the expert. And here we are trying to, get away from that model of, I'm the practitioner, but you're the parent, you have the power. So I think they come with that mindset because they're coming from a medical model, deficit-based model, where they're kind of being told that someone's going to help you. They think it's going to fix the problem and we're here to fix, whereas it's a lot different to fixing, isn't it? It's more about getting children to function, getting children to achieve things just like their peers, but it's also keeping the family unit going. And that's where the work that I do, it works around that, the whole family unit working together, using those positives that we hear so much about in positive psychology, is the belief system, the hope, the values that they hold. And we know that parents love being the caregivers. They like being a parent. They want to parent their children. So that is a positive. It's not like, yes, it takes away from their time of working or other things, but we do know that those things are there and they help parents, move on. And actually using those strengths towards helping children achieve goals is the key, according to what we know from the research and from our work.
Thank you, Anu. I'll bring in Anik and Silvana now. And the rest of our session, we're going to be really focusing in on the Now and Next program that they developed, and what they describe as the program that they needed when their kids were little. Anik, I'll start with you. Could you talk to us a little bit about why you developed Now and Next, and what does it set out to do?
Thank you, Rachel. So a step backwards, just before that, to see where it came from, where our thinking developed. And we have a graphic that is called our 310. It describes at a high level, firstly, our evidence-based, which is the bottom level. Secondly, where the focus of our attention is in the system. And thirdly, that the impact we're wanting to achieve is, as shown on the top band, to build family capacity through participation. So participation is just what Anu and Kath were talking about before when they were talking about setting goals and working on their goals. This theory of change is linked to a website with more explanation about each one of the parts. So within a system-informed positive psychology perspective, we're working with 3 elements of the system. On the left, historically, the disability sector assigned a responsibility on professionals to create effective partnerships with families. But as family-centered practice developed, the focus became increasingly on families and on their roles, which is on the right of this theory of change. However, what we're finding in our research and developing peer workers as a workforce of its own is another element which is in the center of this theory of change. Then the role of emerging family leaders is revealed as an increasingly important link between professionals and families. Perhaps we can talk here about leverage points in a system. We achieve outcomes by running evidence-based program, now&next is one of them, to increase families' empowerment, hope, agency, and well-being. During the program, which is done face-to-face or via Zoom, parents and carers learn with their peer groups to formulate and achieve an inspiring goal for their children, build novel, positive partnerships with professionals, optimize the informal networks. And in terms of sustaining the outcomes, which is the one level of the theory of change, there are three groups of people converging as a community of practice level and how learning continues for each group and between groups. now&next is based on a positive psychology approach. It's a strengths-based intervention. It's an 8-week or 20-hour program for parents with children with disabilities, evidence-based positive interventions. So for instance, character strengths, mindfulness, well-being, etc. It starts with a prospection in positive psychology terms, intervention, activity to set inspiring goals. The program empowers parents to formulate and achieve goals for their child, their family, and for themselves. Parents are connected into different channels as practices. Peer parents are trained to run the program. In short, it was a program we needed when our children were little. Silvana and I both have adults with additional needs. So we launched a pilot version in 2015 and have since then incorporated parents' ideas through active co-design. You can see a very short movie about Pictability, which is the bespoke tool that we built based on positive psychology concepts such as prospection. So Anu and Cass talked about the challenge for parents to set meaningful goals instead of handing over their controls to professionals. Parents have their own expertise, but how to do it? Because we found that a conversation is not a good medium for opening up inspiring possibilities. So we designed that bespoke tool, and you can have a quick look at it.
Life. Sometimes it doesn't go to plan, especially when you're the parent or carer of a child with a delay or disability. You seem to always be on the go, but left wondering if you're actually getting anywhere. What if we told you you don't have to feel like this? Pictability allows you to catch your breath. Have a play, follow the steps, take your time. By the end, you'll be reconnected with what's important to you, your child, and your family without even realizing it. That's just how Pictability works. Pictability helps you turn what's important into what's achievable. What's achievable then turns into a map for a great life, your family's life. And before you know it, you're on your way.
Thank you, Anik. And I think one of the things that really stands out about the now&next program is just how beautifully produced all your materials are and the level of thought that has gone into them, in addition to that really well-established evidence base that underpins everything that you're doing. Silvana, I might turn over to you now, because alongside co-creating the now&next program with Anik, it's also served as the basis for your PhD. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your research findings in there?
Hi. I continue the systems-informed positive psychology perspective as a lens through which we viewed the experiences of parents of young children with disabilities. Here I present an illustration to summarise a case study. We critically examined typical approaches to disability supports for families of young children, identifying the existence of two dominant paradigms. These are disability is a disadvantage and expert knows best, which we see on the left-hand side of this illustration. Families participated in a strengths-based program informed by a systems-informed positive psychology approach and co-designed by professionals and parents. Thematic analysis of the program records and focus group data identified two primary themes, representing alternative perspectives that arose throughout the intervention. These are on the right-hand side of the illustration, and they are, we will start with our strengths, and we've got this. Participant comments indicated that they developed a greater sense of well-being concepts and practices in their communications with their children. Examples of these comments are under the seesaw. The case study provides clear examples of the shift in perspectives that occurred and suggests that the incorporation of systems-informed positive psychology principles within early intervention approaches provides a potential pathway for shifting the problematic paradigms that dominate disability care. We've demonstrated this systems shift as occurring through a downward pressure, as illustrated on the right-hand side of the seesaw.
Thanks, Silvana. And I think one of the real strengths that underpins the Now and Next program as well is your dedication to methodological rigour in the research approach that you've taken. And Moggy, I know that you've been doing a lot of work over the many years that Now and Next has been running, gathering a lot of data and analysing that data around these key measures that really connect to levels of empowerment and hope and well-being in your participants. So I'm going to turn over to you now to tell us a little bit about your involvement and the findings of the research that you've been doing so far.
I am a mom of two beautiful young boys, and my eldest son, Tingus, he is 7 years old, and he has a diagnosis of autism. I came across this program when my son was really young, just after receiving a disability diagnosis. This program gave me tools to really activate my own agency and made me realize I can drive the change, and made me realize what's important for us as a whole family. It made me see my son's diagnosis and my reaction to it from a different angle, and much more positive and hopeful side. And after I completed the program, they just tapped on me on the shoulder and asked, hey, would you like to be involved with this work? And that's how I became involved with this amazing program. So I brought in my prior work and educational experience. I've been involved with extensive data collection, as you said, Rachel, and analysis around the key outcomes and measures. The dashboard you are seeing on the screen, it summarizes our global achievements so far since 2015. Now Next program, it has been carried out in 4 different countries: New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and Finland. And we have done the program with 57 groups of families, and 565 families completed the program and joined our alumni network. And from those families, almost close to 50%, 48% families are from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. And we have also organized and hosted 4 conferences, and more than 500 families attended these conferences. These conferences are by families and for families conferences. And we have trained 34 peer facilitators as parents. They delivered the program. And families, when they came to the program, they set 3 goals. A goal for their family, a goal for their child, and goal for themselves, the personal goals. And then they work to achieve those goals during that 8 weeks. And we can see that over 90% of families, they have achieved their goals during the program, and in the face-to-face sessions, and over 85% of families achieve their goals in online sessions. We use a number of standardized outcome measurement tools in our evaluation for the program, such as PERMA, psychological empowerment scale for parents of children with disability, hope theory, etc. So you can see on the screen the families have been reporting a positive outcomes in terms of increased empowerment, increased skills and knowledge, and agency, and then hope at the program compared to the beginning of the program. So this blue part on the graph, it is the baseline they reported at the beginning of the program, and the very bright green one is the gain they achieved during the program. We also see increasing parent satisfaction about the program over the 8 sessions. Even more so, we see amazing comments and quotes and feedbacks coming out. For example, in this slide, we included a couple of feedbacks that we received from the parents. Like a wonderful program that has helped me embrace my son's strength in order to build confidence and identity. Now and Next was everything I hoped for and more. I feel supported, empowered, and armed with all the tools I need to break things down and work more easily towards outcomes. Be there for my son, my family as a unit, or for me personally. I have done a lot of work on myself over the last few years and focus on strength and positives already. So this course just strengthened my outlook. Thank you to all the peer facilitators who are knowledgeable, passionate, and welcoming, warm. Come to South Australia. It's a parent quote from South Australia. This course has been extremely beneficial for me, for my mental well-being, and as a result has influenced me to parent and advocate for my child better. It has also given me the ability to take a step back in my personal relationships and access things from different angles and viewpoints. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moggy. And alongside Moggy's analysis, Tim, you've also been conducting an independent evaluation of Now and Next. Can you talk us a little bit through what you found in that evaluation?
Thank you, Rachel. Yes, I'm a psychologist. I work at the Centre for Community Child Health, which is part of the Murdoch Children's Research Institute that Janine referred to before. And we were asked to do an independent evaluation of the Now and Next program. And we were looking, this is done several years ago, we were looking at data from 15 Now and Next groups that were run between January 2017 and March 2018. And there are 154 families of young children involved in these programs. We used a mix of qualitative and quantitative methods. We were looking at both the process of the delivery as to whether it was delivered as it was intended, etc., and the outcomes. The specific questions that we looked at in the process evaluation was, did the program get to the intended target groups? Was it delivered as intended? And how did the participants rate the program sessions? You can see the outcomes evaluation questions, which were, did parents achieve the short-term goals that they formulated? We obviously couldn't measure the long-term goals. How did the parents' empowerment before the program compare with their empowerment afterwards? So these are the positive psychology elements. How did their hope scores compare with their hope scores afterwards? And how did their well-being compare after the program? We used a participatory research approach. We had parents participating in the evaluation during their participation in the program. Parent peer facilitators who were running the program were trained to collect and record the data real time during the program, so we could use that real time data to modify the program. And a parent peer worker, Moggy, assisted with the data organisation and analysis process. Did the program reach the intended target groups? Well, we had an average attendance rate across those groups of nearly 80% over an 8-week program, falling off towards the end, but a pretty strong representation. And what was particularly interesting was there was a high representation from culturally and linguistically diverse families, 60% of participants, an unusually high percentage, and also a good representation from fathers, another unusual finding. Was the program delivered as intended? Yes. There was comprehensive and systematic documentation of the session for use by peer facilitators, and there was real-time monitoring of feedback, and that was incorporated into the program for continuing improvement. And how did the participants rate the program sessions? Their ratings generally increased session after session over the course of the program, with the exception of session 5, where scores always decreased slightly and then picked up again. There are reasons for that. To what extent did parent participants achieve the goals they formulated? And here, the program was highly successful in providing all parents with the experience of developing and achieving short-term goals. There are a total of 134 child goals, 137 family goals, 117 personal goals were recorded, and more than 9 in 10 participants achieved all 3. Now, this is remarkable when you think that this is a group that's starting, that is only working with other parents and with each other, and yet demonstrate that they can achieve things without the help of professionals being involved. To what extent did parent participants become empowered? We had not a complete set, but a subset of participants showing statistically significant increases in their empowerment and in their sense of agency. So the positive psychology elements are working there. And to what extent did parent participants' well-being improve? Again, we only had a subset of participants complete the general measure of well-being, and on average there was a statistically significant increase in participants' health, happiness, optimism, and a decrease in their negativity and loneliness over the course of the program. Again, the positive psychology element showing out. This shows the question that we had about a program like this is, what are the active ingredients? What are the elements of it that are most important? There's a complete list of potential active ingredients. Is it the parent contact that makes the difference? Is it having a structured sequence of sessions? Is it using parents as facilitators? Is it the positive psychology framework? So you've got a whole list there of, now, are they all important? If we only got half of them right, would it still be effective? These we don't know. I know which ones I put my money on, but we really need to demonstrate that empirically. So conclusions, on the evidence of this particular study, the program is highly successful in providing parents with the experience of formulating and achieving short-term goals. And that, as I would argue, is extremely important in early childhood intervention. There are signs that the program also appears to empower parents and promote their well-being. I'm being cautious about what we're saying there, not because I think the program doesn't do it, but because the evaluation wasn't good enough to show it. Given the limitations of the methodology, the program can be regarded as promising. Further research is clearly warranted. This should involve trials in other sites with larger numbers and more rigorous research methodology. And the key questions we want to address are, what are the features of the program that are most central to its success? And are the short-term gains found in the present evaluation sustained over time? And of course, does it achieve long-term goals? And I'll leave it there. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Tim. And as a team, so this group that is speaking to you today is part of a bigger research program as well. So we're going to be continuing that, building on the work that Moggy and Tim spoke to really start to understand what is it that's going on in the Now and Next program that's contributing to these outcomes for these families. So we'll finish off today with just what I'm terming a few little take-home messages for each of us. Janine, I know earlier you spoke to your experience as a parent and that shift that happened for you in encountering Now and Next, and this transition away from a deficit focus to a more strengths-based focus. Could you give us a few thoughts on what you think this impact can be for parents and the impacts of something like Now and Next?
Yeah, thanks again, Rachel. I think one of the key takeaways is that there's a change in our relationship thinking, that we now see ourselves as parents and professionals now in partnership, and that there needs to be that acknowledgement that the parents are the experts and the professionals contribute to our whānau's well-being rather than tell us, perhaps. And it's been a big shift for me that community really does play a bigger part in our thinking today, as well it should. And it's quite nice to get back to that maybe, 70s, 80s way of thinking about our community. And I have noticed that talking with some other parents that they're now less inclined to shift their children when there's a problem at school, because they see it as part of their community rather than as there's the problem, it's the school that's the problem, we need to move our child out of the community. So keeping the child in the community, being more willing to work and put pressure back and a bit more onus on those professionals as well. For me, I see things so much more positively now and value the input from professionals so much more. And I'm a lot more realistic about the expectations from the professionals. So when we go to those meetings with different departments in our hospital system, I understand that there's no cure and there's no fix-all, but we have a full and frank discussion and we start to discuss things more realistically. So the professionals are much more relaxed around me and understand that I'm understanding, and therefore they can be a lot more frank and forthcoming and discuss possibilities more. For me personally, again, my daughter's outcomes are so much more meaningful now. She's happier, she's calmer, she's more relaxed. She's not going to hide in her room for the rest of her life, as she thought she was at the age of 18 when I said, no, you're not. And she, her friends are from the disability community just as much as they are from her past school friends, and making new friends and being more comfortable out in the public. And I can't tell you how much happier that makes me. I'm an ordinary mum now instead of someone with, a big chip on my shoulder. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Janine. And Anu, can you talk from that, then the perspective of those service providers and professionals in this space? What impact do you think this might be having?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. So just before I get into that, we need to remember the model that we talked about that is based on positive psychology. So it is the family quality of life model, as you can see in that slide, which I just thought was a nice time to bring it in now. So this is a dynamic model, and it was the work of Zuna and her friends. And they talked about there are several factors, not just professionals or the family, but there's a lot of factors that predictors or mediators of the family's quality of life. And it is based on positive psychology concepts rather than stress and depression and anxiety and things like that. So they talk about demographics, of course, like the family, like finances and employment status and stuff, but also talk about beliefs, expectations of what families see themselves, and a family unit dynamic. So there's the internal things that you can see them like a gearbox, how they intertwine and they make smooth movement possible if they're all working in unison with each other. But then there are, on the dotted lines around, you can see that there are many other factors like early childhood intervention services or the Now and Next programs or family-centered practices that kind of dictate what they're the mediators of a good family quality of life. We actually did some research on early childhood intervention services with 122 families, and we found that clearly family characteristics and beliefs, along with the family friends and strategies such as problem solving, positive coping, belief systems, values of being a parent, and their own faith actually helped family quality of life. So this was, it's similar to what's written in past literature about positive psychology. We clearly found that parents were talking about these qualities, that these were actually helping them. So their scores seemed high on family quality of life, and we were quite surprised that, there's a lot going on, but what is it that keeps them going? So it's good to remember, yes, we are a small part of that circle or that gear, that the wheel that's moving. But on that right side, on that slide, there are challenges. So it's not always smooth sailing. So as practitioners and service providers, we kind of remind ourselves, where parents talk about these things, that poor health, lack of sleep, lack of funding, lack of coordinated care that they receive, peer-to-peer support, and especially times in their life. So there are transition points, like when they receive their diagnoses, when they move into a school, when they have to leave school, go to university. These are the times when the wheels start getting, a bit tight and don't move smoothly till the parents find, they reach an equilibrium and then they start moving smoothly. So that's the beauty of family quality of life, that it's not dependent on one thing. It's dependent on all these different systems that work together. And we don't expect it to move all the time smoothly, but just being mindful that these things, programs like Now and Next, programs where practitioners are, family focused or look at strengths, are actually very important to the flow of the quality of life wheel. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Anu. And in line with this systems approach, of course, we have these broader macro systems that impact on us. So Tim, I might turn to you now to have a bit of a chat about what you think this shift that Now and Next is helping facilitate might mean from a policy perspective.
I think the key thing here has to do with parental ability to formulate and achieve goals. In the early stages of being a parent of a child with disability, parents tell us that they feel profoundly disempowered. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know what their goals should be. The whole concept of forming goals, as Anu has said, is quite strange to them, and so on. I see the Now and Next program as a kind of circuit breaker, because people come out of this thinking about what they want to achieve for themselves and their children and their families, and be much less inclined then to engage the professional system in a passive way, thinking that the professionals are going to be the ones who are going to tell them what to do. Instead, the parents are the ones who can tell them what to do. That's the empowerment notion. That's what I think Now and Next does. Thank you.
Thank you. And Janine, I think you can talk a little bit to the New Zealand example from a policy perspective as well. Most of us are here in Australia, so you've got some expertise, I believe, in New Zealand.
Yeah, thanks, Rach. I'm from the mid-central region, and you're right, Tim. We are expecting more. So we do have those higher expectations, and we do have to thank those that went before us in this journey in the disability sector. But over the last 3 years, I've noticed that there's more flexibility in thinking that allows for programs such as Now and Next and others, and from it, we expect more. The disabled and those that support them as needed, particularly family whānau, we expect to be considered as the experts we so rightly are in our own lives. We expect to be actively involved in all decisions made relating to the disability sector and our respective communities. Those with disabilities in their whānau expect more autonomy in relation to their own funding, meaning greater choice and control. We're no longer liking the idea that we're being done to because of the system administering from afar. It's bottom up rather than a top-down approach, with feedback filtering through and up at all levels. There are those with disabilities in their whānau who contribute to policy at government levels through various ministries and DHBs, at the local and regional council levels, and in our own homes and communities, to give just a few examples of how people are using their expertise at this level that they're comfortable with. Again, here I am today with the support of peers much more experienced than I, influencing change in my own small way. Whānau, family, acknowledge various strengths and abilities and encourage all to contribute at their own level of expertise and comfort, with providers, local NASCs, and others involved with supporting those with disabilities to choose their own way of life. I feel that policymakers are struggling to adapt and keep up with these new expectations and merging with expectations around responsibilities for funding parameters. Deficit level funding gaps should be identified, monitored and controlled by the individual until the day that we no longer see disability as a deficit or a quality point of difference. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Janine. Peggy, I might bring you in here to sort of give us a positive psychology angle on all of this, given that we're talking to a positive psychology audience. What do you think this all means from a positive psychology perspective?
Thanks, Rachel. I think, thinking about working in this space, a few key takeaways I can really see. Number one, when we start to think about how positive psychology really fits within this space, I think throughout this presentation, we've really seen those aspects of the complexity that really sits here. There are different assumptions that are sitting very deep within care practices, our funding models, things that filter down to the lived experiences of families. But if we just come in and start to use some of our interventions without actually thinking about the context within that, in many ways, we're not even going to get an audience. I think one thing that's been beautiful about the Now and Next program is the co-creation that has happened. And I think, we really need to be thinking from this more, a systems informed perspective, to be thinking about what elements of positive psychology are relevant, but what does that actually need to look like within the context that we're sitting in? It's not just a simple approach to things, but it's really thinking about the complexity, but finding sort of the simple levers, or what we've called simplexity, so the simple areas of change, while keeping in mind that complexity. For researchers, I think we need to be, I think when we start to go into this space, it actually opens up a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges. We actually have to start to think, what can we actually robustly evaluate, and what is actually going beyond some of our normal ways of doing things? We actually need to be thinking about different approaches to evaluation that are capturing the lived experience. A simple treatment and control group doesn't necessarily always work when we're starting to look inside this complexity. We also need to be thinking about our tools. So many of our tools are really around sort of the kind of actually pretty high functioning normal so-called people, whatever normal is. And when we start to think about, those with disabilities, they have so much we can actually learn from that actually might revolutionize the way that we actually do things, so that everyone can actually have a voice. And I think as a whole, what this really speaks to is, if we're really going to have an impact, we actually really need to have that close connection between researchers and practitioners. And so we're really understanding the lived experiences of families, of people of all walks of life, but we're also it's challenging us as researchers to become creative, to step out of our typical boundaries, explore some spaces that we otherwise might not trod, but through that, we're going to develop a better understanding of how to create good functioning for all people from all walks of life, and not just those who fit perhaps within the narrow boxes that we can put people in at times.
Thanks so much, Peggy. Anik and Silvana, first of all, congratulations on the work that you've done with now&next so far. I know we've only really scraped the surface today in terms of what it is and what it's accomplishing. And I know that it continues to grow and evolve as well. You've recently launched new versions for primary school age children, new versions for adolescents. You've been working in partnership with different state governments. If people want to know a little bit more about now&next, Anik, what should they do?
Thank you, Rachel. But all I'm going to say is, with a team of people like this around us, how else could we not? It's just absolutely amazing that we bring together and integrate so many different perspectives and so many different angles to the topic that we're studying. In some links, one is the link to the now&next program. Another one is to our theory of change, because that takes a wider lens and other people might be interested in a different parts of it. There's also a link from the New South Wales Department of Education, who chose the tool that we've explained about earlier, Pictability, as one of the 7 innovation projects last year. So if people are interested, they can click on that.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you. And Peggy, for those interested in knowing a little bit more about SIP, the Systems Informed Positive Psychology direction, where should they go?
Thanks, Rachel. So I do have information on my website, and you'll see the link right there. It's a growing community. We'd love to bring others on. We have so much to learn, and we'll only do that as we all work together.
Thank you. So Janine, Catherine, Anu, Anik, Silvana, Peggy, Moggy and Tim, thank you so much for joining us today and for contributing to this rich discussion that we've had. I wish you all the best.